introduce a very good friend, Mark Davis. Mark is going to share with us his personal life experiences on children with disabilities. So we look forward to hearing from Mark. Mark Davis served as a leader in private faith-based schools for 33 years, most recently as head of school at Covenant Day School for the past 10 years. From what I understand, Mark retired in June of last year. He earned his bachelor's degree from Northwestern College and a master's degree from the University of South Florida. Mark has served on boards, including a term as board chairman for Christian Schools International, and he was a big brother in the Big Brothers in America program. Mark has been a varsity high school basketball coach. He is an avid golfer and a passionate oil painter. And I can say firsthand that his paintings are absolutely beautiful. He's very gifted and talented. He is married to Rose. He and Rose have 4 children, 3 sons-in-law, and 6 grandchildren. So let us give a nice warm welcome to Mark Davis.
Well, it's so good to be with you and happy St. Patrick's Day. I need to certainly start with a word from my wife, Rose. She wanted to make sure to give me a charge. She has a habit of doing that. We've been happily married for 40 years, and this last December we had our 45th anniversary. If you do the math, we had a 5-year stretch was a little sketchy there. No, I'm just kidding. So Rose said, remember this, Mark. I believe that no male ever really matures beyond 13 years of age, so behave yourself. So that was one of her charges for me. And then she also said, I want you to put in a plug for Johnny and Friends. That's an organization we've been very much part of for a long time. And the last part of my talk will refer to my son, who is a disabled adult. We'll get around to that. So I want to touch upon 4 different vignettes for you that revolve around the topic of what I've referred to as godly whisper. I think we need to be bold in our world, in our country, and take appropriate risks. I like your list of now 5 very important aspects of being a Rotarian, and I like the fun part of it. I want to just share the first one with you. I'm at the Memphis airport a number of years ago, and I'm going through the checkpoint. At the checkpoint, I'm a nervous traveler, so I get there really early. I'm like 2.5 hours early for every flight. I'm going through getting my bags checked. You know the great bins, you've seen them. You almost stare at them like, oh, here's another great bin to put my stuff in to go through the checkpoint. This one, though, had a wallet in it. I've never seen a wallet in a great bin before, perhaps you have. But I decided rather than doing what I was supposed to do, because I said I'm a risk taker, not always godly, but I'm a risk taker, I decided I'm going to put my stuff in with this wallet and go through and see what's in it. And so I did. And when I got to the checkpoint, I opened it up, and there was nothing in it in terms of any identification. The only thing that was in it were 8 $100 bills. So I called, of course, my wife, Rose, and said, Rose, I found a wallet with some money in it. What should I do with it? I was thinking set of golf clubs. I was really running through this list, and she said, well, you need to pray and ask God to show you whose it is. I said, right, that's not going to work. So I said some kind of a feeble prayer. Remember, I'm early to my flight, so I'm standing there watching the security guy thinking, I'm not giving this to that guy. He's just going to pocket it and buy some nice Christmas gifts. I'm very trusting, I guess. So I stood and I watched. Nobody for like an hour and a half showed up and talked to this guy looking out of sorts at all. So I heard my flight call. I said, I better get there. So it's a full area where people are seated. There's one open spot, and I sat down by this elderly couple. I said to the lady, how's your day been? And she said, oh, it's been fine. She didn't say anything of that. So I leaned over and said to the gentleman, he was, I'd say in his 80s, I said, oh, how's your day been? He said, I've had a really bad day. I don't travel much at all. And I got really nervous going through the checkpoint, and I lost my wallet. So I said, well, did you have identification? He said, no, that was another mistake. I had no identification. And I said, what was that? He said, about 8 $100 bills. So I took the wallet, I said, well, here's your wallet. He said, well, who are you? I said, I can guarantee you I'm not an angel. So anyway, my story there is the importance of taking godly risks in weakness. In fact, maybe that's the most important place to take risks, is in weakness. Rotarians and even Americans don't really revel much in talking about the power of stepping into weakness. But I was weak at that point. I had a weak prayer. I absolutely did not believe that would happen. But lo and behold, it did. So the next story is one where I'm on a treadmill here in town. I'm at Planet Fitness. It's the old Planet Fitness on Old Sardis Road, where you had like 6 treadmills across and they're about 6 rows deep. And I don't hear that well, I don't see that well. So I'm in the front row, I'm marching. The lady next to me happens to be an African-American lady. She is on her phone, just talking incessantly. And there's a sign right in front that says no cell phone usage other than in the lobby area. And so I'm trying to listen through my earbuds. She's talking, I mean, I'm getting annoyed. So finally I just said, I didn't say anything to her. I went up to the desk and said, there's a lady up there talking on the phone you might want to tell her about. So I moved to the back, very back, as far away as I could get. And so I see this lady go up to her, and she points at, this is not gonna go well. So she gets off her treadmill and points, I won't say everything she said, but she said, you can kiss my, I know you can fill in the blank. Wow. What do I do here now? What do I do? I got off my treadmill. The one next to her was still open. I stood by her. I said, it's obvious we have something we have to talk through. I said, first of all, I want to apologize to you. If I was troubled by something, I should have just spoken to you in person, in a caring manner. And I didn't do that. I said, I'm actually a Christian. I really blew it. She said, well, I actually am too, and I shouldn't have said the word I did to you. So, you can imagine the people around us watching this. What's going to happen? Is this lady going to clock this guy, or what's going to happen? She probably had a right to. So we talked for a half hour. We walked on the treadmill. What ended up happening to that is Phyllis is her name, a friend. She went to chapel with me at our school, and we talked together about the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. And here's how she started the chapel. We had like 400 high school kids. She said, I want to start by telling all you kids, your headmaster's a real jerk. So anyway, I said, yeah, I can be. So, but the position of going to a place of weakness and godly risk taking, another story about that. I'm going to ask for a photo of me with an African-American man to pop up here, because he's been my little brother for 42 years now. If you can get the picture up, that's fine. If not, that's fine. So George, this is 1980. I'm in the Tampa, Florida area, and we didn't have children at the time. I said, Rose, we ought to be giving. So here's George. This is my son. We'll talk about him a little bit. So George was 10 years old at the time. And I had moved from rural Iowa and from even more rural Montana to the Tampa area. I'd never been around people of color at all in my life, ever. Well, the Big Brothers program assigned me to George. And I'd never known what it was like to be anywhere other than in a middle-class neighborhood. George grew up in what might be described as a project area of Tampa. So George became a wonderful friend, but I learned so much in that community. I never saw another white guy there. That's somewhat immaterial. We went to George's church, and this is where I want to pour out my heart before you, because I don't think we grow together very well if we are superficial. We have to be real with each other. So I'm going to George's church, all African-American church. After we walked out, my wife Rose, who grew up in the same communities I did, said, are they worshiping the same God we are? And I said, absolutely. Now, this is something Rose would like me to be telling you, because it's easy to talk about someone else and some of their foibles. But the one for me, I remember the very first time I was with George, I bought him ice cream cone. And this gets around to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Russian author, who said, if we could just put all the bad people out in outer Siberia, And everybody else that's a good person in the same place, he thought, then he was convicted. Oh, what about that dark corner of my own heart? Well, here's the dark corner of mine, I'm still growing. So George, ice cream cone, he's eating it, he gets about halfway through, and he said, Mark, I can't finish it. Here, you finish it. Now, I wouldn't have finished my own child's ice cream cone. But that's not why. I thought for a minute, is George clean? I thought all of a sudden, oh, I didn't think I had a racist thought in my being. But all of a sudden I realized I did. I had some things to work through. So 9 years, 3-year commitment with the Big Brothers program. And then 6 years after that. And during that time, I learned things I never wanted to learn. But George ended up murdering someone. He spent about 15 years in the Florida penitentiary. His oldest brother was murdered. His 2 younger brothers committed murder. And I just decided, hey, in my weakness, I said, I can't believe that I just put 9 years in this kid's life and look what he did. Again, a selfish thought. So I had to get to a position of weakness, seeing that dark corner of my own heart with my own godly risk-taking to be able to advance and pour properly into another person's life. And that's not easy. We have to be willing to look at ourselves authentically. So the story about George, one of my favorites, is I moved away during that time. I ended up in Philadelphia, so it's like 15 years later. I'm with my friend Steve from Philly. I don't know if you've ever been around with Philadelphia. Anybody have friends from Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, aren't they the craziest human beings on the planet? I mean, honestly, they really are. So I love Philadelphia. My years there was great. Steve is the craziest of the craziest. So we're driving down Highway 41, just south of Tampa. And Steve looks down this road, but you have to put it in the context of why would he point to this road? He said, what's down there? I said, well, that's where my little brother lived. We kept up through the years. In fact, I talked to George, he's now 52 last week. So we're going down this road. And I said, Steve, turn the car around. That's where my little brother lives. We're going to go and see if George if he's around. So we drove down this road, pull up. That's the first time in my life I've ever heard Steve not talking. He was just quiet. There was a big man sitting on the front stoop of George's house. And mind you, George's youngest brother is named Ted. Ted was 5 when I moved away from the area. He's now 20. And I didn't know it, but Ted's in the next yard talking to some friends. And so I rolled down the window and I said, do the Holloways still live here? George Holloway, my little brother. And in the next yard, after 15 years, Ted hadn't seen me since a 5-year-old. He said, is that you, Mark? He came running across the lawn and jumped into my arms. You and I can't have those experiences without investing in people in places of weakness, taking positions where you are not going to be always in control. And that's one of my favorite moments in life. The beauty of human love. The next story involves Nate. Oh, by the way, I'll finish with George. George, when I talked to him last time, I was hanging up too soon. Say, well, George, great talking to you, and I'm hitting the click button, and you're going to say, I love you, Mark, and click. Oh, mercy. I called George back up and said, George, I love you too. Bye. So, this is my son, Nate. Last story for you, but taking risks. So 1991, probably 1990, we don't always plan out our children, how this all work. We pretend we do, sometimes it happens. We had 2 daughters at the time. I said, Rose, I'd really like to have another child. I said, I want 2. I said, I want 3. So I want out. So Rose is pregnant. She delivers prematurely a set of twins. So she not only went from only 2 wanting 2 to 4. It took a while for her to get over that. But anyway, she loves the kids now. It just took about 20 years. No, I'm kidding. So Nate is born with a bleed in the brain. And we were given a really tough prognosis. He's not going to be able to walk. He's not going to be able to run. And we had this, he's not going to be able to. So we got home. We lived on Lookout Mountain in the Chattanooga area. Rocks everywhere. Waterfall. It's just It's a disaster for anybody who's gonna get out and just play roughhouse as a boy. And she said, what are we gonna do? I said, well, we're gonna let him fall. If he falls and he breaks an arm, we're gonna get it patched up. We're gonna raise him just like we would any other child, and we're gonna go for it. Now, that didn't happen automatically. I went through about a 3-day period of severe grieving. And in that grieving period, I happened upon a book by Malcolm Muggeridge. If you're not familiar with Malcolm Muggeridge, I'd encourage you to look him up. He's the great editor of Punch magazine in Britain, one of the great thinkers of the 20th century. When he joined the Catholic Church, he stood up before a group of Down syndrome kids in the first 2 rows, joined the church largely because of the testimony of Mother Teresa. And Malcolm started wondering, why does God allow people with severe disabilities to be in this world? Why? Why does that happen? And it's a little bit of the Solzhenitsyn testimony, but more for us, so that we can gather and understand better what true grief and sorrow looks like for those of us who think we don't have disabilities. But the reality is, my son told me this several times, that the real boring people in the world are the neurotypicals. He believes that his world are the people that are really with it, really exciting. And I've learned that. I'm not an expert with children with disabilities, but I have a disabled son whom I love. He's 31 now. So the story I want to share with you about Nate, I told Cheryl I'm going to keep this about 17 minutes and then allow you to ask some questions. Again, it's with godly risk-taking. What do you do? When puberty hit for Nate, it just crushed him. He was just absolutely crushed, to the point where we were going to Boston. We were in Boston at the time. We were going to Boston Children's Hospital pretty regularly. And it was taking a toll on everybody and everything in our home. And it hit rock bottom when we took him. At one point in time, he was becoming non-communicative. So the bottom line story of this is that he ended up being in a psychiatric hospital for about 2 weeks and didn't want to live. So that's a hard spot for everybody. We would visit him daily, and I remember this because I think it's important for all of us when we think about this whole notion of what life's about. We can take godly risks, but where do we go to with those? You have some of that up here about what's important. So I asked Nate, who do you want to see? Is there anybody that you'd like to see? Mind you, he was suicidal at this point. Put a hood on, but all he could do was swear. He would just swear. Have a hood on and swear. So, well, Nate, anybody you'd like to see? He said, I'd like to see Mr. Sharon. Mr. Sharon was born with disabilities, one of the teachers at Lexington Christian Academy where I was the head of school. I said, I understand that. And he said, he understands what suffering's like. We all know what that's like. It's a matter of degree. We all have suffering in our lives. It's a matter of degree. I said, I understand. I'll talk to Mr. Sharon. Mr. Sharon went and visited him. I said, anyone else? He said, I'd like to see Father Khan. I said, Father Khan? I didn't even know you knew Father Khan. Father Khan was a stereotypical Eastern Orthodox priest on the Romanian side of Orthodoxy. He wore the long flowing black robe with a crucifix. He had a pepper gray beard. I mean, the stereotype. He looked like an Eastern Orthodox priest. I said, don't you want to see one of our pastors at our Presbyterian church? And he said, no. I said, why not? Why do you want to see Father Khan? Here's what he said. Because I know he loves me. Folks, we can get all the right stuff in our heads, but if it's not in our hearts, if we don't convey that with one another, then it's going to be like a clanging gong. It's not going anywhere. So those two messages, the one from George's younger brother leaping in my arm and saying, wow, that doesn't come without a lot of investment. Father Khan exhibiting and demonstrating love. And to demonstrate love on a consistent, regular basis takes risks. You need to step into people's lives where it's messy. It's not neat, it's not clean. And folks, we can do this at any age. You can come at any time, at any place, anywhere. So I just want to share those stories with you to motivate you more toward considering the oxymoron of godly risk-taking. There really is no such thing. But will we step out? Will we actually know when those opportunities present themselves, and will we step into those frameworks? In a position of weakness, not of strength. And I believe when I've done that, I've seen extraordinary value come out of that in so many different ways. So thank you for listening. Now, if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to field them. Yes, sir.
Not a question,
Yes.
rather a reaction.
Okay.
I think I've just heard a better sermon than I ever preached in the 17 years I was in ministry from you. And it brought back one of the dearest, most relevant things I've ever experienced in my life. And I'll shorten it because I could go on a long, long time, but you just struck the very, very poignant part. I was pastor of a little congregation in Maryland, just outside DC. Fabulous congregation, all sorts of PhDs, they were a dime a dozen, all sorts of CIA people. Incredible congregation. One of the members was a gentleman by the name of Ray, won't give his last name. He was the guy that single-handedly brought back the whooping crane to a viable existence in this country. He used to fly all over Canada, go up, he'd have the nets, they'd pick up one egg, they'd fly it back to Washington, back to Tuxet Wildlife Research Center. He had a daughter who was a magnificent artist. He had a wife who was absolute dear. He had a son who was a brilliant computer guy, but he had a fourth child. And that was Tommy. But Tommy was severely retarded. I don't know whether he was on the spectrum or where he was on the spectrum, but he never said anything. He just came to church every Sunday, behaved himself, was great, no problem at all. And they just moved from Colorado to Maryland. And I went over to Great Pastor Claude and said, hey, here's where we look at having the congregation, all that. But as I walked towards the door, Tommy saw my blue VW outside. He went tearing into the house. And here's the punchline. He yelled, Mommy, Mommy. And Joanne said, what? He said, Jesus is coming to our house. Now, I'm not the pious guy that was the moment when after 17 years, I realized what an impact God had made, not me.
Yeah, right.
This retarded, severely kid had a better sense of who I was than I did. And I think it fits right in, and I want to thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I enjoyed the stories, and you made me think through your stories as you were telling them. And my question is, or my definition of what you said would be a noble action. That's what a noble person would do, is acting, disregarding emotions or desires to make something good out of the situation.
Right.
But is this genuine or by intention? Does it come from the heart, meaning genuine and natural to do that, or is it by intention to fight your own dilemmas or your own other desires just to do it because you want to be that person, or you want to be called that person?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. Sure. If I've done personally things out of selfishness and for myself without even knowing it sometimes, and sometimes knowing it, yeah, absolutely. But there's a way that gets knocked out of you. So, for example, with Nate, and I'm amongst friends. Rose will say you just went to that 13-year-old telling this, but I'll go to my 13-year-old at this point in time. My first Sunday in church here at a Presbyterian church in Matthews, it's Christ Covenant Church. It's a large Presbyterian church, probably 1,400 people there. My first Sunday, it's already a bunch of people there know that I have this new responsibility as head of school. So I'm with my wife and I'm with Nate. Well, right in the middle of the sermon, Nate, he's not there anymore, but you know what he looks like. He's sitting, my wife's here, he's here. His head is in the back of the pew in the middle of the sermon. His mouth is wide open like he's catching flies. He's sound asleep. So I'm embarrassed. So this gets to this, it's about me at this point in time. So I reached over and I thumped him on the chest to wake him up. And he sat up with a bolt and blurted out in the middle of the sermon, "What the hell?" Yeah, there you go. So the new head of school, what did I do? I was sitting just like you, and I put my head between my knees. I didn't want anybody to see me. So afterwards, we're in the car, and my wife Rose is just reading the riot act. You're walking out of church, you're swearing out loud in front of everybody. He said, "What in the world are you doing?" He said, "Why in the world were you so restless?" and so on. He said, "I'll tell you why, because the preacher preached too damn long." That was his next comment. And then the next, you probably don't get these words here. I'm sorry, I apologize if that's anybody. The next thing is, my wife said, "You don't even know what he was preaching on." Nate said, "I do too, taming the tongue." So that was the topic of the sermon that day, which the irony and the humor, that's almost so much. So I started laughing at that point. My wife said, "It's not funny." I said, "Rose, it's actually hysterical, especially now that I'm away from all these people staring at it." But yes, yeah, that's always a tug of war, I think.
The reason I'm asking this question, because it is not rewarding, to me, it is not rewarding unless it is natural and genuine.
True.
If it is done by intention, or by
True.
practice, or by following an order or instructions, then the reward is not as much.
You're absolutely right. I'm glad you said that, because almost everything I've talked about has unfolded naturally. In the midst of some of it, I've had some selfish things that have come to my heart, for sure. But you're right, yes. To say, "Well, I'm going to go out today and do this," it's probably not going to work. But I do believe all of you folks have different times in your life where you know that you've taken action and it was the right thing to do, and other times you didn't, you regretted it. We've all had that. So those are things that we just, I think, struggle with humanly, but it's a really good point. Yes, it has to unfold naturally. Yep. Anything else from anyone?
May I share a thought?
Please.
I'm not trying to take the ground or anything,
No,
but I'm just thinking through what you said, because I think the story is good examples for a lot of people. But I may not tell them a funny story, but as some of my thought process, you may find that funny, is watching the movie Groundhog Day.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen that.
I have.
And basically, in a nutshell, the essence of the movie is that person who is obnoxious and egocentric and full of himself, and he gets to relive the same day over and over again until he realizes at the end that by helping people and being there for everyone throughout the scenes of the movie, he was able to get what he wanted, which is the love that he wanted to acquire. Which is, after watching this movie so many times, this is, struck me that, after maybe many years or many times that I watched the movie by chance, is that basically this is the essence of life. You are in a position to help people and not expecting anything in return, just by helping people through difficult times, even if you help them, replace a flat tire. And then at the end of these events, your life gets to be more normalized and you really get what you want. And you become happier and you find love just because you are genuinely helping people and not expecting anything.
That's key, don't expect anything. And last words for me, what remains is faith, hope, and love, and the greatest is love. So keep loving, folks. Thank you for including in your day. It's been a blessing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was wonderful. Very eye-opening for a lot of us, I think. Kelly, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think we are about wrapped up. We've got a little bit of extra time. Hey, does anyone want some time back today? Extra time for socializing? So let us, sorry, I'm trying to find my, we need raffle. Where is the raffle?
I got it right here.
Oh, here we go. So if you could spin it, Mark, would you pull a raffle ticket for us, please?
I'm the guy who pulls the number out here. I understand Dave always wins, right? Is that true? Well, he's not gonna win today, because if he does, I'm going back and drawing another one.
I think Cheryl's been talking to Dave a little much.
All you are is
think I've got one here.
Last three.
Last three is 060.
When do you know when I win?
Are those
Of course.
Of course he did. You believe that. Congratulations. I should, you know.
You may call.
During the market.
All right.
One more thing, if I can take my happy dollar back and put it back in here, one more thing, very happy to see Rick with us today.
If we can stand and all do the 5-way test. Of all the things we think, say, or do, 1.
Is it true?
2.
Is it fair to all concerned?
3.
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
4.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And 5.
Will it be fun?
All right, I'm digging it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Kelly.
Last bucket's out, the car buckets.
Right.
Thank you.
Can Barbara hear us? Barbara, can you hear me?
I can, Brad.
You gotta do it.
Yeah, your book's coming Saturday.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to have a book signing in the.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it to her.
Ours hasn't arrived yet. Lawyer called you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
I just came from rehab, which is down here.